Hello and welcome to another update. In this one I'll be covering the latest developments from the front line, starting out in the Zaporizhzhia front, where we start out by Urozhaine. The Ukrainian forces continue their offensive operations in the area. Yesterday they managed to capture the parts here to the southeast of Urozhaine, allowing them to get closer to the village and possibly going for an envelopment around the village or going towards Verbove. This was covered in the last video, but I returned to this because generally, what we are seeing is that the Ukrainians launching attack after attack, as I've been saying for a long time. They try to advance, they manage to advance sometimes, other times they don't. But in total, every day there's a company or two being launched in this direction. And every day that either gets destroyed or they withdraw from those positions. So what we're seeing is that the Ukrainians are sending wave after wave, and they are going so hard at this. How many Russian forces are they actually facing? That is when we take a look at the Zaporizhzhia area, here by Urozhaine, the village which has been fought over for over 2 weeks now, I think approximately 17 days. This village was defended by about 100 to 200 soldiers. 100 to 200 soldiers defending this village for up to 17 days. Now the Ukrainians have been able to push them out of the village, and they're most likely going to capture it by the end of this day. According to the latest update by Syriac Maps, they've managed to capture the center, and they're moving further southwards. They're pushing the remaining Russian forces, if there are any, out, and then they're clearing the buildings and so on, so they would capture it at the end of the day, most likely. So exactly how many Russian soldiers were able to hold back multiple brigades of Ukrainian forces attacking from 3 directions for 2 weeks? That is approximately 100 to 200 soldiers. So 100 to 200 against multiple thousands of soldiers, able to defend it for over 2 weeks, and then we still see some of them retreating, although they ended up retreating under artillery fire, and some of them did get hit, as shown in a video that I cannot show because they get hit. But essentially, we see Russian forces holding back Ukrainian forces for 2 weeks. Then the Ukrainian forces are finally able to push them out, and then they launch artillery strikes, and most likely that is not an ending the Russians were hoping for after 2 weeks of holding back the Ukrainian forces. But still, the fact that the Ukrainians are being held back by such a small force due to the fortifications that the Russians have built. And then we see that the main defensive line, which consists of multiple layers, the Ukrainians have not even reached it after 2 months of fighting. Then how exactly do they expect to break through the main defensive line if 100 soldiers are able to hold back 2,000 to 3,000, maybe even 4,000 soldiers? This is some defense-in-depth strategies used by the Russian forces. If they actually reach the main defensive line, then there will be much more amounts of Russian soldiers. So yeah, sure, the Ukrainians will launch a main push where they will have 50,000, let's say 50,000 soldiers at one point. The Russians can easily muster up the same if they are able to react and detect the Ukrainian forces in time. That would mean 50,000 against 50,000, where the Russians have significant defenses. Then what if the case is that, which we see now in Urozhaine, the Russians are holding back Ukrainians when the Ukrainians have at least a 10 to 1 advantage. In this scenario, we see that they are 1 to 1. So if the Ukrainians wish to break through Russia's defensive line, they would need a 10 to 1 advantage to actually break through. And even then it would take some time. And in that time, Russia can decrease that advantage. They can send reinforcements, they can relocate their forces, they can send their air force. They have so many options. And it is here that a lot of people like to call me pro-Russian. But I'm just stating the facts. We know, based on video evidence as well as reports from the front line, that the Russian forces here fighting is a company-sized unit. Some claim that the video showcasing the artillery strikes on Russian units, that the Russian unit size was somewhere around half a battalion, that number hundreds of soldiers. But taking a look at it and counting the soldiers, it was less than 50. So they claim hundreds of soldiers when I see less than 50 black dots walking across the field. Just take a second to count all of these red circles, which each indicate a single soldier. 21 soldiers, and this is allegedly half a battalion. And to the ones who don't know, a battalion is about 1,000 soldiers. 4 to 6 companies, that could be 400 to 600 soldiers, so at the very least 400. So they claim at the very least 200. So the very least estimate would be 10 times as many as we see in the video. If the numbers are correct and the company-sized unit, 100 to 200 soldiers, if the only ones who are left are 20 soldiers, then that would be a 90-80% loss ratio. However, we know that is not a case for sure, because according to Military Summary, who geolocated this video here, he showcases a vehicle that evacuated some soldiers on the Russian side from Urozhaine. So this is most likely the very final part of the unit, which means that these are the final soldiers. Everyone else has already retreated. This is the backline, the rear guard, who is going to withdraw without anyone else being left behind. This is the final units. So estimating casualties based on this would be very difficult, as there's not the whole picture here. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about this, because it is very important that we don't just take these reports and take them at face value. We have to stay critical to what we see, to what we hear, especially when we hear it on the internet, but also when we cannot fact check the things ourselves, then there's nothing we can do. We can just base it off of different narratives. But when we have the ability to fact check for ourselves, then we should do it, because it is important that we do not fall for these stupid propaganda attempts. And why is it important for us to go around and ignore the propaganda and get to the truth? It is because we do not want to take decisions based on false information. If you go and take a business deal, you want to do an investment, anything you do in relation to your own life, whether it be talking to your relatives, having a relationship, anything at all, if you base your decisions on false information, then that decision is going to be a bad decision. So stop making bad decisions, learn the truth, and bypass the propaganda and go to the reality of things. I made a video where I did a short analysis on the situation, considering the amount of Russian soldiers facing Ukrainian soldiers and how the Russian defenses are working throughout the front here in the Zaporizhzhia front, and exactly what that means for the rest of the offensive, for Ukraine's main push, and so on. However, it is for Patreons only, so make sure to check it out if you are a Patreon. Other than that, we have to move on to the Bakhmut area. Fighting continues. Both sides attack each other by the Klishchiivka area. The Ukrainians are considerably trying to hold on to whatever gray zone there is left of the south of Klishchiivka, while the Russian forces are doing all they can to push the Ukrainians out of the area. Meanwhile, the fighting continues all throughout the front line and the northern parts. There's no clear indication of territorial changes. Sinkivka stays in the gray zone. Kislivka and Kotlyarivka continues fighting with no progress on either side. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.